everybody, and welcome to another edition of Greet the Week. I'm Jan Moray here with my co-host Mona Duncan. And today's topic is surface emotional habits. Mona says, one's behavior may seem automatic, yet doing something over and over can become habitual, right? Is attitude a part of behavior? And if so, can I learn to be different? So Mona, get us started here. What are you thinking about this?
Okay, will do. Surface emotional behavior. My love of words.
Yeah.
And I just look at the surface. The surface is just right here on top. And all too often, we can get in a habit of kind of living there, where we are just so sensitive to our senses. And we just kind of respond to them without going deeper to realize that there's more to us than just that emotion. And it's important, it's very, very important. But it is seeing who we are deep down inside. And instead of being in that little sailboat that's being tossed about with all the winds of life in general, to see how that we can put that anchor down to keep us settled, to not just, to really think things through and to see how that we can. And so I thought, kind of looking at that surface, we just kind of looked a little bit at what does it mean to be resilient. There has been a lot of research done on countries or segments or communities where there seems to be a lot of elderly people that have lived strong, healthy lives their whole life, and just kind of see what their secrets were. And so I just kind of
so when you said surface emotional habits, you're talking about the emotional habits that you see that are on the surface,
right?
And
what
then,
we see just on the surface.
And then you're talking about resilience now. I'm missing the link between these surface habits and resilience, because I mean, some surface habits kind of sounds like they're not totally genuine, or am I wrong there?
Well, that's the way I'm kind of seeing it. That it's just on the surface.
Okay. And maybe a show that you're putting on.
Could be the way you're handling it, and it's kind of out of habit. This is the way I've handled it before, and it may have worked before, but it may not be working now.
Okay.
And it's kind of looking at it as I could go a little deeper. Maybe there's something, it kind of goes with the self-evaluation. It kind of goes with the just knowing who we really are, as opposed to just wanting to spout off, well, that's just who I am, I can't help it. It's realizing that we have more ability to help what we do, what we think, who we are, than we realize we do. And it's becoming aware of that. And then, delving deeper so that we can kind of see, begin to see, maybe do a little digging into who I really am. And thinking of all of that, and I go back to last week, our topic and what we were talking about and so forth. And then as we were talking afterward, first of all, I looked at the video once it had been done, to kind of critique it. And sometimes that's not a wise thing to do. But anyway, I realized that in that I was talking about seeds, and I don't know that I really got the word seeds out, because I was talking about the morning glories and how they can be invasive, like a lot of other things can be invasive, unless you really want them to invade. And there has been a time in my life that I thought I wanted something invasive to be planted so that it would just take over. And I didn't care if it was invasive until it becomes invasive. Yeah. And that's how life can really let us know the fact that although I have been thinking this, doing this, as I look at the fact that, you know what, I really don't want it. I don't really want to be overly emotional. I want to be more, I want to have the boundaries, and I want to live within those boundaries. I don't want to
So if you're being
allow.
emotional, you're not setting your boundaries, or you're not able to, or you set up boundaries um, because it's uncomfortable.
Well, in looking at, I don't know which, but a lot of the personality tests that you take,
Okay.
and it talks about emotional, emotional, emotional. And it's like being emotional is this horrible thing.
Oh, yeah. It certainly feels like it, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
like it's this horrible thing. Oh, wow, wow, this person is emotional. Well, you know what? Yeah, it's okay to be emotional, but it needs to be reined in, not like a wildfire.
Mm,
It needs to
mhm.
be reined in so that it can be used effectively. And I noticed that,
Kitty seems to be emotional right there. She wants your attention.
well, the cat was asleep, and it usually sleeps through these, but right now, so we'll see if he calms down. If not, I'll stick him outside. Uh, but so I think I was looking at, as opposed to being just so quick to respond to things without thinking them through. To me, that's kind of resiliency to
To not get caught up in the emotion, to be able to
right,
see it for what it is.
right, to not get caught up into it, to, because being emotional is really a pretty good thing.
Yeah. It's
But
nice to be able to feel the different emotions. It
yes, yes, it
is.
is.
It
Yes, it
is.
is. Yes, it is. And so we'll kind of talk about it. So well, anyway, we're just going to look at resiliency. So in doing that, I just spelled it out, and I hope I spelled it correctly. RESILIENCY, and just kind of looking at what they mean. That meaning I gave to it, okay?
Mhm.
So I put the R for relationship. And with holidays coming up, and Thanksgiving and Christmas and Hanukkah and all kinds of get-togethers, if we do get together, uh, there's always relationship there. And not only is it relationship one with another, but it's taking those things and not just looking at them on the surface, but going down depth-wise as to what do we relate to? What do we relate with? So we relate to people, yeah, but do we relate to them in a way that is trying to understand what is difficult to understand? Do we relate to them in regard to, well, I mean, as we begin to look at all the things that entails in relationship, I mean, we have a relationship with time, with money, with stuff. And
Mhm.
the way we handle those and the way we relate to those things can definitely affect the relationship that we have with others, the relationship that we have with people. So it is looking at, how do I relate with this person, with this time, with this money? How do I relate with this pandemic? How do I relate with burnt toast? How do I, how do I relate to the flat tire? How do I relate to those things? And can I relate in a healthier way that will bring the serotonin that's calm and being able to handle it? Or will it be the, being not knowing what to do? And then in relationship, RE, resiliency, looking at emending. And emending comes from the Latin word meaning to take the fault out of.
Oh,
Take the fault out of. And so how can I relate to this by taking the fault out of it? I mean, the
as in
toast,
blaming it for all your woes.
yeah. Instead of blaming it for all of the, yeah, woes is a good word. Yeah. It's, do I have the toaster set too high? Do I not have it set high enough? take the fault out of it. Maybe you need a new toaster. Maybe it's just the operator didn't notice what they were doing when they were operating it. But to take the fault out. And in looking at deeper, and in looking at science and how that science is pretty much facts, but the scientist looks at the phenomenon and notates it, records it, but doesn't judge it, doesn't come to a conclusion with it until a lot of research has been done to begin to look at it, that if this is the notation and this is the notation and this is the notation and other people have been seeing basically the same thing, then you can begin to look at the fact that, yeah, okay, maybe there really is such a thing as gravity. Maybe there really is such a thing as, and then it begins to become a law, even though it was already a law, we just didn't know it was a law until it was named as being a law.
Of course, sometimes with science too, you make a determination from, all the different observations, but you're using what you know at that time. And so, decades beyond that, more information can have been gathered. And then maybe what you said was science has been disproven and you have to create a new theory. So you don't, so it is based on facts, but the facts do change from one time to another, depending upon what else is known at the time.
They do change or they don't change, but we change the way we solve them.
Yeah, right.
As in looking at the theory of relativity, things are still relative.
Right, yes.
But the new one of looking at the quantum and how and John Born's and how that they overlap, and the fact that people now took his idea as how it's the shadow that overlaps and overfolds and all this kind of stuff, and now they've been able to display it by a computer to see how it would work if you could actually see it. To see how the invisible would be visible if it could be visible. And as we just get all of that new information, it becomes deeper and deeper and deeper. And I know sometimes you have a tendency to think it's so deep, I've got to get out of here. And maybe we do. So that we can begin to take the fault out, because just maybe kind of goes back to what if you could?
Right.
Maybe there really is a little bit of truth in it. Maybe I'm just not willing to see. Maybe I'm just not willing to see it this way. So in resiliency, R-E-S, and for S, I've been looking at spirituality and the fact that we are a spirit. We seem to be a spirit. That seems to be one of the things that's been handed down, and it kind of, to embrace it or to not embrace it. If it's true, it's true. If it's not true, it's not true, no matter how much we believe it. No matter how much we believe it doesn't make it true. No matter how much we disbelieve it doesn't make it true, if it really is true. But it's looking at the fact that if there is any truth to it, what kind of a spirit do I leave when I'm not present? Whether it's an eternal thing or just a during this 30-minute thing or during this little time of being together, what kind of a spirit do we leave behind? Because that spirit could also be energy, but it fit with spirit, with spelling resiliency. And are we glad to see someone leave, or are we wish they could have stayed longer? What kind of a spirit do we have? And then R-E-S-I, insight. Looking beyond the surface to a deeper meaning, to a deeper connection. And with Glasser, we've got the connecting habits and the disconnecting habits. Maybe think about those, some insights into that. Could I think another way? Could I see this another way? Is there more interpretations than one? And back to what I was saying earlier about words, you know how I am with words. Uh, there are words that have contradictions built in,
Like
such
what?
as left.
Theft or left?
Left,
Left.
Left.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Okay, he left. Okay, meaning what? Gone, not there, departed.
Right.
Oh, he left his book here, meaning it remains and it stays.
Oh, okay. All right. I see.
Yeah, yeah. So left, there are just those words that inside. This is what it is. Is it really what it is? Is it an illusion? Is it stable? Is it what what have I labeled it? Because what we label it pretty much is what we see it as.
Right. Yes.
Could be left or right.
Could be left or right. And then in RESIL, so in looking at that L, I thought of, now what am I going to do about resiliency? And I came up with larder, which is a really old word, which means a storehouse of canned goods. I'm from West Virginia, and we had basements built into mountainsides because, well, some were actually basements, but you need to get something that was stored there, go down and, go down to the larder and be willing to go down and see what's there. What have we stored up to keep ourselves sane and emotional, as in feeling those feelings, but not emotional as in dumping those feelings on others. There's a difference in sharing and dumping.
Yes.
And how much to share and how much not to share. And
Sometimes sharing, I guess, could be dumping too, if it's something people don't want to hear. It can be like a heavy weight that is now being put, or they're agreeing to accept.
right. And then the next I in resilient is interdependent. Realizing that we need others, and that others need us, and that it does take a village, it does take a community, and that it's that each, John Donne says, each person's death diminishes me, and each birth increases us, because you just never know what that new life is going to bring into the universe. As we looked at Barbara Streisand's song last week, that think of all the children and all the dreams that could come true. Think about that interdependence, that we need each other. And in being resilient, the next E is to embrace. Embrace who we are, but also embrace who the other person is. And to embrace the situation, to embrace what is going on. And that embrace, it's kind of like those double words. It's to embrace, it's to kind of know who you are, but it's also to know who you're not, where your limits are. It's to see that we have gifts and talents, and sometimes we may, it's just to embrace and to see change as a reason for growth. And then resiliency, or RESILIEN, N is natural. Looking at nature and how, as we begin to look at the seed and how things grow, and being comfortable with who you are, comfortable in your own skin.
Mm-hmm.
And as we can be comfortable in our own skin, we are in a better position to set the tone for other people to be comfortable around us, and to see that community, and to see that we do all belong. we're in this world for a reason, for something to
And
matter.
being true to ourselves takes a huge weight off of us and allows us to be more calm and just feel better.
Yes, yes, exactly. And then resiliency, the C, being creative, is to realize what creativity we have that is so deep within us. And that's part of being true to yourself, is to being your own creative self, even if not everyone is in approval of. There's a big difference in acceptance and approving.
Hmm.
And it's learning to accept the person as they are, or learn to accept you as you are. And then for the resiliency, I had the Y. I began to look at yield. And it again is one of those words that has a double meaning. Yield sometimes, we can be overly emotional, angry, frustrated, sad over something because we haven't yielded to the fact that it is what it is.
Mm.
But then to realize that yield is another one of those words that has the double meaning, because you plant a seed and it brings forth a big yield.
Right, right.
So it's whether it's the constraining of or the flourishing of. What are we going to yield? And I got to thinking about last week, and I was talking about the fact that, I had a hard heart and wanted that exoskeleton and to have a tender heart.
Uh-huh.
Got to really thinking about that. Nancy, even in our talking afterward, Nancy made the comment. She said, "You do not have a hard heart." And I got to really thinking about that. Because you know what? If I did have a hard heart, I think back to my daughter. I think I've shared this before, but I'll share it again. That one time I really did chew somebody out, and they just dissolved into tears. And I told her, I said, "Come on, let's go. We're leaving." And, and as we got in the car, my daughter, without an ounce of guile in her little body, she said to me, "Mom, you hurt her." And I said, "I don't care. I don't care." And my daughter, sweet, 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 she said, "Mom, that's the problem. You don't care."
Oh, wow.
Oh.
You know what? I really didn't have a hard heart, because that pierced my heart. Somehow it got through. So I got to thinking about that. Instead of having a hard heart, I had this thick external shell.
Yes, yes.
And I had wanted it, I wanted that. I wanted that exoskeleton, but a tender heart. But what I just didn't know how to say it. I couldn't see it.
Yeah.
And what I really wanted, what I really had was a hard shell.
Right.
But somehow that word had gotten through and it penetrated.
Yeah. Probably
And
because it came from your daughter.
Yeah. That pointed observation. And it was, you know what, as I really think about it even more, is that it was an observation, not a condemnation.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, something that it was a blind spot for you.
Yeah. But as we can look at anything and just observe it rather than interpreting it, or rather than giving it a label. Maybe somewhere down the road we can give it a label.
Right. But I think there are a lot of people. I think there are a lot of people that have that hard shell around them, and they come across as having a hard heart and not caring, when it might not be the case at all. And how do you help to break through that heart, that shell, that shield that they have protecting them? Protecting them from what? It's keeping them from making relationships and from a lot of positive things that could be in their life. And how can we get to acknowledge that, to recognize that when somebody's doing that, and to have patience with them in order to help them, really be true to themselves, be who they really are, instead of having to hide behind that shield.
Right. And even if that trueness of who they are is speaking frankly,
Yes.
then be okay with speaking, but also learn to be okay appreciating another person's openness, frankness. It's going back to amending, to release the fault, rather than making the fault the part of the problem.
Right. Yeah.
And to know when to yield and when not to yield.
To choose your battles, to know which battles should I fight and which ones should I just let go. That was something that I learned, being in the corporate world, is that, there might have been a lot of things that I didn't agree with, but they were minor things, and I would just kind of let them go, because the important things, I wanted to be able to bring them up and not have people think, well, she never likes what's going on. She's always got something negative to say. And so if you can, choose your battles and work with people, then they're more likely to listen to what you have to say.
Yeah. And so in, looking at how to be resilient, I always want to, eat my own food if I prepare it. If I study it out, it's for me too.
Yeah.
And to look at the fact of not only, but being resilient, being the very things that I speak about. And instead of saying I have learned, I'm still learning.
Right.
I'm still in that learning process, because in the growing process, and to be okay with that. And
yes.
that kind of thrive and grow and expand. And
that's huge, to be okay with ourselves, and to not feel like you have to do something because of what other people are going to think, because you never know what other people are going to think. And so you have to be good with yourself, and it's okay to have that opposing point of view, as long as it's something that you really believe, instead of pretending like you're okay with what they're saying.
yeah, I remember one night at working with the prisoners, we were having a discussion, and someone asked me a question, and I don't remember how I answered it, but they said, well, then, in other words, you don't care. And I said, yes, I do care.
Yeah.
I do care. I care. It's just that I don't care so much that I'm not going to speak truth. And if it comes across as not caring, then it'll have to just be organically. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to deliberately. I'm not going to deliberately not speak what I see at the moment. I want to certainly have to monitor my tone of voice in speaking.
Okay. Right.
But not, because, but then to think that, just take it for the words itself, whether it's being received or whether it's being given.
Mm-hmm.
To give
Well, I think it is good, somebody brought it up to your attention that it sounded like you didn't care, because that gave you the opportunity then to explain what you're really thinking, instead of just having them go off and think that you don't care.
Mm-hmm. Mhm.
So that said something about how much they appreciated you, or that they thought that your input was valid, is that they told you, if they wouldn't you wouldn't do anything negative to them because they were honest to you to let you know that they thought that,
Right. Yeah.
they
I
could
mean,
bring
that's
that up.
exactly, you have really heard it correctly. Because I
Yeah.
was explaining and said, well, I was speaking because the answer was no, you cannot do this. You're not crossing this boundary.
Yeah.
You're not going to do it. So, and they said that, so then in other words, you don't care. I said, well, I guess I really don't, because
But I'm good with that.
right, but I'm good with that. And also I'm not going to let you know that I don't care in such a way that's going to belittle the person.
Yeah.
I mean, it just is what it is.
Right. Right.
And there can be ways of going around, but handling things pretty upfront and as it is, and speaking the truth that you see it at the moment is in the long run.
Yes, the long run. Yeah. Well, I see we're out of time. Do you have any parting words for us here today?
Well, just to taking the fault out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe the kind of, with the gatherings and so forth, and everybody being of different personalities and different ages and different, all kinds of differences you could just put in there, is just to look at just taking the fault out and to observe without interpreting.
Right.
And that's even to observe self as to how am I handling this
Okay.
without and taking the fault out.
Right. Right.
And looking at the possibilities that it could be handled, could have been handled worse, could be handled better.
Right. We're always learning.
Yeah, always learning.
Well, thanks everybody for joining, and we'll see you again next week for another edition of Greet the Week, and hope everybody enjoys the Thanksgiving holiday, however you are celebrating it or not celebrating it.